I think we need to probably reintroduce ourselves since we've now got two new potential speakers. And that is, we could go around the table. I'm Jerome Davidson. I'll be chairing this meeting. I'm the councillor for Hindhead in Haslemere.
Yeah, I'm Maxine Gale. I'm the ward councillor for Waverley, for Whitley and Milford. I'm also a parish councillor.
And James.
James Staunton, I'm councillor for Western Commons. And
we're assisted very ably, of course, by our legal representative from council. That's Gillian.
Gillian Carson-Jones, Waverley Borough Council Legal Services.
The meeting will be recorded and minuted by our
Kimberly Stone, Democratic Services, and clerk for the meeting.
And a licensing officer, that's Paul Hughes.
Paul Hughes, licensing manager.
And we have around the hall two representatives from immigration.
Caroline Laird, Immigration Enforcement. And Ava Ansari, also Immigration Enforcement.
And Ms. Chowdhury, you were here before, so I know you and your colleagues.
I'm David Daz. I'm counsel for the premise licence holder.
Guy Hicks. I work for the same company as Mr. Daz.
Okay, right, fine. One thing I would say is that I'm slightly disappointed that Mr. Rahman wasn't able to attend. Is he well?
So he would have no standing because the license has been transferred.
Yes, but I go back to our first initial meeting.
Yes, he was unwell. I've obviously given advice that he's no longer the premise license holder, and we would explain the circumstances during the submission.
Yeah.
So I will deal with it then if you allow me, Mr. Chairman.
But he is well now?
Still poorly. Still not well.
Okay, I understand. My sympathies, and I hope he gets well soon. We'd like to try and keep this as informal as possible. We're not a sort of assizes here. So if I could ask Mr. Hughes if you would just introduce the event.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You have in front of you an application to review an existing premises licence for the Rajasthan Restaurant, 103 Longore, Barncombe, Godalming, submitted by the Home Office Immigration Enforcement, acting as a responsible authority. No other representations have been received from other persons or from other responsible authorities. Just to advise you that as from yesterday, we received an application to transfer the licence from the previous holder to Mrs. Chowdhury, and also advised that the previous DPS has removed themselves from that position, and currently there is no DPS in place.
So that's the premises license have been transferred to Mrs. Chowdhury, correct? And the DPS and where will that be going?
If the license remains, which we hope it will, Mrs. Chowdhury is doing a course, her daughter's doing a course, and that they are going to be one of them. I think it'll be Mrs. Chowdhury will be the DPS. So until then, no alcohol will be sold.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
And I'll explain a bit more on that when.
Okay, it's fine. As we're probably best to start off by asking the immigration officers if they could outline their case for objection.
Start with this. Okay. So yes, our application is based on an enforcement visit that we conducted in February this year. So we had received information stating that the employer is employing students who are not attending college to work full time. that they were not paying taxes and being paid low wages. And so we took that case on to go and investigate that claim. Previous immigration enforcement visits have taken place before this one, and we encountered illegal workers at the Rajasthan restaurant. Incidences as follows. So on the 6th of March 2013, we arrested 3 males for illegal working. And on the 22nd of November 2016, there were 2 males arrested for illegal working. So as a result of all of that intelligence, we visited the restaurant alongside officers from Surrey Police and licensing officers from Waverley Council, and visited that address on the 21st of February 2023. Entry was gained by us under Section 179 of the Licensing Act 2003. And throughout the visit, we encountered 5 individuals, one of which was arrested for illegally working in the UK. Due to that, a civil penalty referral was served on the business. And we have actually had that referral come back to us, and a civil penalty fine was issued for £15,000 in relation to that one worker. The business had previously had 3 referrals made against them for a civil penalty. The first one issued to Miss Chowdhury, which was cancelled at objection on the 23rd of January 2017. The second referral made was also issued to Miss Chowdhury, and that one was, a fine was issued for £20,000, which was objected but maintained on the 23rd of February 2017. That fine actually remains unpaid and has been referred for legal review by our civil penalty team. And the third referral that was made ended up with a no action notice, and that was in 2018. So the business has employed people who have no right to work in the UK, and this means no checks have been carried out on the employees. Therefore, there is no knowledge of the person's history, and this could put members of the public at unnecessary risk. There is a clear disregard to UK law, as the employment of people with no right to work in the UK has taken place on multiple occasions, with no consideration given to the potential harm that members of the public may face due to the required checks not being carried out. So we are submitting this on the grounds of preventing crime and disorder. So the restaurant is has employed illegal workers, which is strictly prohibited under the Licensing Act of 2003 and also prohibited under the Immigration Act of 1971. Employing illegal workers in the UK has impact on the community and society, as it deprives HMRC and the government of revenue of non-payment of tax and national insurance. It exploits undocumented persons by paying them less than the minimum wage and provides no employment or income protection. It also encourages other immigration offenders to seek similar types of work, and allows businesses to unfairly undercut other businesses by employing cheap labour. So that's the basis of our application. Did you want to add anything?
No, we'll make observations. Thank you. So good afternoon again. So I'm David Dadds. The starting, I think, position is just to clarify that Mr. Rahman is no longer the premise license holder. We've transferred it with immediate effect yesterday. Mr. Rahman has been removed as the designated premises supervisor. Mr. Rahman is the father of Mrs. Chowdhury. It sits to my left. Mrs. Chowdhury is now the premise license holder. And obviously the police could, or other responsibility could object to the transfer, but that will be a matter for them to show that there are exceptional circumstances. So that's a separate matter altogether. You won't be surprised to hear from me that employing illegal workers is a very serious matter, and that your statutory guidance at section 182 sets out that even at first instance, you'll consider revocation of the licence. I've looked at the application for review, considered the history which is there, and I can quite candidly say that if Mr. Rahman was here, then it's most likely that you would revoke the licence, and I've expressed that to the family, and therefore Mr. Rahman has taken the decision. He's 65, coming to 66, taken the decision to remove himself from the business and retire. He's been suffering from some ill health. So with that in mind, Mrs. Chowdhury, daughter, along with her daughter, have in effect notified through the accountant that they're taking it on as, or she's taking it on as a sole trader, and that she is taking steps to, in effect, she has taken the steps to take on the business for herself. She's content to have a condition that excludes Mr. Rahman from the premises or any involvement in the business going forward, financially or otherwise. So there can be no benefit deriving from any future operations as of today. She's taken the step to transfer the licence. She's removed her father as the DPS. So at the moment, there are no licence for activities permitted until a new DPS is put in place. I dealt with the matter of East Lindsey District Council and ANIF, which is a case which the Home Office have on their website about illegal workers, and I've dealt with that at the Home Office on behalf of a local authority. And these matters are serious. But my opinion is that if you remove the individual who was in charge and have the control in mind, and that it's transferred to the daughter, and she in herself in her own right is law-abiding, person of good character, there's no reason why she can't and shouldn't be able to take on the business, even though they're connected by father and daughter, but there's no reason that cannot happen. You'll be not surprised me to say that I'm not, and we're not using this as some sort of ploy to avoid a period of suspension. And I would invite you, using the principle of Bassett law, is to impose I would say a shorter period of suspension, not so long, but shorter period of suspension as a mean to deter, not only to deter others, including Mrs. Chowdhury, that this course of conduct is not permissible and should not occur. Notwithstanding, there's no liability to her. In relation to the period of suspension, the guidance says a week. We are not likely to get the personal licence from Mrs. Chowdhury for a couple of weeks. So I wouldn't invite you to go beyond 4 weeks, but certainly you could mark this matter with a period of suspension. 4 weeks is still significant. The original intelligence about students was not correct, although an illegal worker was found. 4 other people on the premises being employed. This is a business, as Mrs. Chowdhury believes, can continue, can employ lawfully, generates an income for those individuals and their dependents and her. Notwithstanding, she's worked in the premises, she's worked under the direct and control of the premise license holder and the company, of the director, and that she will make sure, assurance to you, as she has it, will ensure that all the steps are taken to make sure that the person has the right to work before they commence their work. I will say, in relation to previous penalty notices, they will be incorrect to have been given to Mrs. Chowdhury they should have been either to the company or Mr. Rahman, as he and they are the directors or the controlling mind, and not Mrs. Chowdhury. I can't remember the exact date, but I think it's possibly around October 2016. These issues would have just ordinarily just been civil penalties. Then there was a change where that civil penalties and the guidance has changed that allows it to be included as matters which you can take action as a licensing authority. So matters before that, so the matters in 2013, possibly the 16, I don't know what the date is. It might have been actually into 17. Many arguments were that they're not relevant because they're civil penalties, it's not a crime, and that they shouldn't be applicable. And that was why I took the case on for East Lindsey to show that they are. And that's where you got the judgment, and that there was all changes in the statutory guidance that says actually if a civil penalty is given, you can take that into account. So I think the matters of 13 and 16 are in effect are distinguished from the matter that's occurred this year in February, which has a fixed penalty notice given to it. That might be some academic, because I think all of it is academic if we've taken out the cause of concern, which is Mr. Rahman. So going forward, Mrs. Chowdhury has had training regarding the licensing objectives and generally the Licensing Act, but she was going to undertake her own personal license course in the next week or two. Her daughter's already done it and her daughter's already passed. And that we will go through the exercise of showing how she does the checks with ID, but nevertheless she knows that the accountant will help her with to ensure that the individuals are able to work, notwithstanding it's her responsibility, but others can just check the ID and check that they are entitled to work. I don't think I can add much more to that other than it has been advertised. No resident has raised any concerns of crime, disorder, antisocial behaviour, public nuisance, etc., which is a positive. No local councillor has raised any concerns about the operation of the business and in the sense of its trading position. Licensing authority, the police, environmental health, none of those raise any causes of concern about the operation of selling the food, selling the alcohol, notwithstanding it's right that this review is brought because of the illegal worker. So I think that still matters which you should have regard to, that Mrs. Chowdhury is confident that being a person of good character, person that can run this premises, will ensure that all members of staff do have the right to work, and those checks will be done before anyone commences work. And that going forward, she can operate the business promoting the licensing objectives. So unless I can assist you further, that is in effect how we're putting the case today.
Thank you. Councillors, any questions as well? Maxine?
Just a couple of general questions, really. Has the most recent fixed penalty been paid?
That will be a matter for Mr. Rahman or whoever they've issued it to. I haven't seen it yet, but that obviously will be a matter for Mr. Rahman and the business.
Yeah, okay, as
Yeah.
the previous.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think the previous one will obviously be a matter where they will have to look at it. I think the previous one may just about be enforceable, but I expect they're going to have to look. It might be outside the limitation period now for it to be enforced, but because obviously it normally would have to be done within 6 years, and I think it falls out of 6 years because it's February 2017. But notwithstanding that I think that's a civil matter. that will be Mr. Rahman and the company's position, not Mrs. Chowdhury.
Okay, moving on. Was Mr. Rahman present on the premises on a day-to-day basis, operating the whole premises before?
He was around. Mrs. Chowdhury was around too, and Mum was around, so they have all been around. So, but the responsibility is Mr. Rahman.
And what position did Mrs. Chowdhury hold at the company?
She was in effect working there for her father, doing
Okay,
whatever jobs that he directed her to do.
okay. Right, thank you for now. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Following on from Councillor Gale's comments, I feel slightly unclear in my mind as to the day-to-day operation of the business of the restaurant. As you just said it, 3 members of the family, if I understand you correctly, Mr. Rahman, Mrs. Chowdhury, and her mother, Mrs. Rahman, ran the restaurant.
But I don't say run the restaurant. Actually, mother, father run the restaurant. Mrs. Chowdhury worked for mother and father under their control. So I think there's the distinction.
So they had the responsibility.
Yes.
They're the responsible
Absolutely.
party.
Yeah,
Indeed.
absolutely.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay.
Perhaps I don't know whether Mr. Chowdhury is in the right position to do so. What is the process which Mr. Rahman or the family followed in recruiting or taking on additional staff?
It's my understanding from the individual from February is that this is an individual that was recommended by someone within the kitchen staff, and that they were going through a process of asking for identification, but allowed them to work before that was concluded. That shouldn't have been the case. They should have checked the ID first and waited until that was provided. That's what we're told.
Yeah. I understand, and that's probably why we had, on personal recommendations, illegals essentially being employed by the restaurant. One of the things which I think, Mrs. Chowdhury, if you're taking over running this restaurant, you must insist on a process which is followed literally on taking on any new staff. And I'm sure, David, you can provide appropriate guidance as to
Yes.
checks and things which need to be made.
And we do. We have a system of licensing Connect where it has a number of documents and systems, and part of that we've built training around the right to work checks, because it is, even though it's not alcohol related, we always put it in because it is an important part to make sure that you do the relevant checks before someone's engaged in work, whether they're paid or unpaid.
The other question I've got down on my little list of my little checklist is, you refer to Mr. Rahman as being the director or owner. Who are the other directors of this restaurant?
Well, in fact, it's Mr. Rahman is the premise license holder DPS. Mrs. Rahman, I'll say it that way because it's easier for the moment. Mrs. Rahman is the director. So it's those two, mum and father. Mum's director, dad's premise license holder DPS. That is they've formed it.
So she will continue. Mum will continue to be the director and owner of the establishment.
No, because what will happen is that's their company, it's their business. We are starting our new business, and we've started that as a sole trader. So that comes to an end. In effect, that business will come to an end because they no longer have a license.
Right. I probably need some clarification on here.
So-
As we move forward into the new environment which you're
It's
creating.
sole trader,
Right.
not a company. The other company, in effect, will cease to trade because it doesn't have a business to trade, because they're no longer involved in the business. We've taken on the business.
I am still at a loss. Councillor.
could
No
I-
doubt, no doubt, I
Well,
will be.
So that it's absolutely clear. It's probably because I probably, my understanding is probably, I'm not being clear because I have it in my head quite clearly. So what it is at the moment is Mrs. Chowdhury, Mr. Chowdhury, sorry, Rahman, I apologise. Mr. Rahman and his wife currently have a structure of their business where it's under a limited company. She's the director. He is the premise license holder and DPS. They run their business. That they are now going to retire. So that business, that company will stop trading, has stopped trading. We have come along, daughter, Mrs. Chowdhury, and has registered with the accountant as a sole trader. So that will be a different business. So as of now, it is her business, trading in her right, accounting for the taxes and revenues and liabilities as well as assets. She is now going to be running the business. So that's why there's no continuation of Mrs. Rahman as a director, because that company is no longer going to be running this business.
Sorry, yeah, I see what you're saying. So the businesses on paper, we have Mr. and Mrs. Rahman are ceasing their business, which is a limited company. Mrs. Chowdhury is starting a new business on paper as a sole trader. Who is actually going to be present in the premises running the business as of Mrs. Chowdhury as a sole trader? Who will be there? Will Mr. and Mrs. Rahman still have an input into the day-to-day running of the business? Will they actually be on the premises? What role will they play?
Thank you for that question, because that clarifies things. Mr. and Mrs. Rahman will have no role. In relation to Mr. Rahman, quite happy to do it in relation to Mrs. Rahman. I don't think it's necessary, but Mr. Rahman, we are offering a condition that he should be excluded from the premises and not be involved in the business day to day. So he won't have any involvement, and we're going to condition it. And if he's found to have any involvement or any, it will be a criminal offence. So we're putting it beyond doubt that he's no longer involved with this business. I think there was another point that you made. Who will be there now? Is Mrs. Chowdhury will be running it as the business owner, as the sole trader. So it's her business. And she has got her daughter who has a personal license. Her and her daughter are going to, in effect, have taken over the business, will run the business day to day.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. So there would be a condition for definitely Mr. Rahman not to be on the premises. And could that be extended to the previous director? Because
Yes.
Obviously a director of a company would be responsible for employing the illegals.
Yes, there is no intention of mum coming along to help. So that's fine too.
Yeah. So it's, can't see when these lights come.
Yeah.
So yes, it would be the both parents not involved in the business.
Any other questions?
No, I think
No.
that's sorts it for
Okay.
me.
Do you have any questions here from the immigration officers? Okay, fine, thank you. In which case, I think we've heard everything which we need to. We don't seem to have any
No, I think.
further outstanding questions. What we'd like to do now is retire, and no doubt be getting lots of legal advice from Gillian and come back to you with our findings, and that hopefully
Are
shouldn't
the ladies
take.
happy with that? They didn't need to ask them.
I've already asked that. We should come back hopefully within a quarter of an hour or so if you want to get yourself a glass of water or. Oh, that would be possibly a good idea. Well, I think David's actually summed it
I
up
think he
quite.
probably
Well, you have another opportunity to sum up if you would like, but I think you've already done that right at the outset. Anything else from your side? Okay, right. in which case we will retire and we will come back in about quarter of an hour's time. Thank you for your patience. It's been a difficult issue to discuss and to resolve. And I think, we have seriously considered from the outset the possible revocation of the license, and particularly mindful of the statutory sections 1 and 2 guidance in particular. We have taken into account the issue of the wider community and the individual license holder. We're concerned right from the outset that there has been a history at the premises, and note that there have been a series of events accepted by the respondent. We considered that in order to promote the licensing objectives, and in particular those of maintaining crime and disorder, it is necessary and proportionate to suspend the license for a period of 3 months. This is on the basis that the respondent was present and involved in the operations throughout, and adequate steps had not been put into place to deal with the earlier issues arising from the employment of illegal immigrants, and clear evidence of a disregard of crime and order district objectives, which this council sets. The council has an obligation to do all that is reasonably can to present crime and disorder, and it is under the Section 17 Crime and Disorder Act 1998 that it is necessary and proportionate, in this committee's view, to do a suspension for the period outlined. We welcome and agree that, as proposed by your council, that an additional condition will be added to exclude Mr. and Mrs. Rahman from the premises and from the operations of the restaurant. Equally, we urge the premise license holder to seek advice and ensure proper processes are put in place to avoid any repetition of the likely employment of illegal staff. In conclusion, an appeal can be lodged to the Magistrates' Court, and a full decision will be followed in writing in 5 working days. I do hope that you can get the operation back on a proper footing in the future. Thank you very much for your time and your patience.
And Chair, just so you know, I've handed up a piece of paper with the 4 names of mum and dad so they can be added onto the licence.
That would be very helpful. Thank you so much for that.
And if I could just briefly add for clarification that I did read out an extract from the section 182 guidance, paragraphs 11.17 to 11.28 in the closed session, just to assist, which I know you're familiar with. Thank you.